So as it's a couple of minutes past 11, I'm really conscious of your time. Whilst we are hoping a good number more might join us, I might just kick start. So a very warm welcome to all of you who've joined us this morning from us all at the Florence Nightingale Foundation. It's absolutely lovely to see you here, and thank you so much for joining this special webinar today. I just thought I'd say a few housekeeping bits. The first being that please do, if you don't mind, pop in the chat your role and where you're from, because it's just really lovely for myself and Ricky and Alan to get a sense of who you are and where you're from. So it'd be lovely if you could do that, please. And we are still due to be a fairly small group today, so we really want this to be an interactive and engaged session. And as you know, it's a particular topic that we would love you to just please do pop in the chat as we go through any questions you have for Ricky and Alan, or indeed myself or the team coined as F&F webinars on your screens. We'll be very happy to answer any questions. And just to say that Alan from the Life Search team will be keeping an eye on the chat and will be answering questions. But what I will do is at the end, once Ricky has kindly given his presentation, I will then facilitate an open discussion. So again, please do feel free to pop it in the chat or wait until the end if you've got a question. But without further ado, I'll just say a little bit more to the context of this webinar today. And we are, as I've said, absolutely delighted that you've joined us. As you might well have gathered, because clearly you're in touch with us here at F&F, this is a somewhat different topic for us, but we feel a really, really important one in terms of looking at minimising the financial impact of ill health. And as nurses and midwives, we know that you'll know better than many how very, very important that is. And you know that we put people at the heart of what we do and workforces at the heart of what we do, including yourselves. So we are delighted you've taken time out of what we know are very busy diaries to join us here today. And we're also thrilled to be joined by Ricky and Alan from the Life Search team. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit more at this stage why we're so delighted to be joined by the Life Search team today. As you may know, they are one of the UK's leading life insurance providers. Martin Lewis recommends them, and for me, that is a huge testament. Furthermore, Trustpilot rates the company as 4.9 out of 5 for its services. But probably most importantly for us here at the Foundation, they pride themselves on being a values-led organisation, and care is their top priority value. And again, you will know us as F&F, and you will know how important care is in our values. So therefore, we feel very much aligned to the culture of Life Search too. And that's why we're particularly pleased to have the team here today. In addition, giving back to society and charitable giving is at the heart of their culture. And we've seen that firsthand here at the charity, when in 2020, when things really did get extremely tough for us as a charitable organisation, Life Search were one of the first companies to step in and provide us with a really generous donation to ensure that we could keep our services and our programmes for nurses and midwives going. So we will be forever grateful to Life Search for helping us at that critical point. And now, though, without further ado, I shall hand over to Ricky to take you through his presentation. Thanks so much, Ricky.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and thank you for the warm welcome. So I was explaining earlier that I'm used to Teams, not Zoom as such. So I'm going to share my presentation now. So hopefully you will, as if by magic, you will see my screen in front of you, and I'm just going to make that bigger, so you should be able to see that now.
Yeah, it's there. Thanks,
great,
Ricky.
great, perfect. So we're going to talk today about financial hardship and protection, but I thought I would start with introducing myself. In that Rachel's done an excellent intro, but I have been advising and coaching on the subject of protection for about 20 years, believe it or not, which is a fair time. And I'm very passionate about protection, which is all about ensuring there's a financial cushion that take care of your family if you're not around, or importantly, help you avoid financial hardship if you fall ill. The company I work for, as Rachel introduced you to, is a company called Life Search. We are the largest protection broker in the UK. We're the advisory arm on life insurance for many household names. That's like the likes of Which, Compare the Market, Money Supermarket. And as Rachel said, Martin Lewis recommends us, which is a big tick for us. And what we aim to do, I suppose, every day is help families protect the lives that they love by putting in place the right cover for their circumstance. Now, you won't hear love banded around in financial services that much, but it is really important as a values-led organization, and one that care is front and center of what we do, that we protect the UK properly. I never really set out to be an advisor or a working insurance, so hopefully the presentation that I put today, I'm explaining it in a way that everyone can understand, but in effect, it comes across that what we try to do is make a difference. And I suppose a lot of companies say that, but we really do believe that we do make a difference by being around, I suppose, at the time families need us the most, when they lose a loved one or they become ill. I suppose it's important to say at the start, I'm not providing specific financial advice today, but rather raising your awareness as to the different options out there, and signposting the support and you can access should you want to do so. Alan is on the call with me, so he's going to wave now. They're right on cue, Alan, so well done. And he's going to be covering any questions in the chat as you go through. So if there are some specific questions as I'm tackling some of the topics as we go through, please do feel free to put those in the chat, and Alan will do his best to answer them. But Rachel's going to come in at the end to, again, open up the floor to any specific questions, because I'm covering quite a bit in a reasonably short time. I've got a number of slides that I'm going to talk you through, but there is a little bit of interaction at the end, in that I'm going to ask you to get your mobile phones out, which is great, and it will come to fruition at the end as to why I'm going to ask you to do that. So have your mobile phones at the ready at the end of this presentation. So the agenda in terms of today for the session is on screen now. We're going to start by looking at the cost of living crisis, which I think is on everyone's mind at the moment, and the situation we find ourselves in, with some tips on how adopting a money mindset can help. I then want to look at why protection is important in challenging times, and I want to ensure I relate that to your industry, the healthcare sector. Again, Alan in the chat is going to be specific and can answer any specific questions you have around your individual circumstances, or and also signpost where you might access further information. We're going to touch on knowing your numbers, and that's financial numbers, that is, and how that helps you. And in turn, I'm going to talk at the end a little bit about giving back to the Florence Nightingale Trust, which is vitally important to us at LifeSearch. We're going to cover all this in about 30 minutes, so it's going to be a reasonably punchy session, and there will be a chance, as I said, to ask any questions at the end. So where to start? I suppose the obvious place to start is the cost of living crisis. The rising cost of living has been at the forefront of everyone's minds over the last 6 months, and probably beyond that. We know, in talking to the families that we engage with, people are really feeling worried and somewhat overwhelmed by what's happening around them. And even with the government support on energy bills, food prices have soared, many people's mortgage payments have gone up, and inflation is real stubbornly high. I think the first important thing to understand, though, is that while we can't control the cost of living, we can control how we respond to it. So when you see all the statistics in the media, I think they can be quite difficult to translate into our own lives. And it can be hard to know exactly how to respond to that. I think it's really important to note that many of these statistics that you do see in the media are averages. They're not specific to our own situation, and they don't relate to everyone's individual circumstance. At LifeSearch, we did our own research, and each year we commission a report that looks at the UK as a whole, examining families' health, finances, reflections, friendships, and fears for the future. And it's called our Health, Wealth, and Happiness Report. We commission it every year. And what you can see on screen are some of the findings from our 2022 report, which we published at the end of last year. And again, these are averages, and it looks, a lot of the statistics again look overwhelming. They might not relate to your specific situation, but there are two statistics I wanted to bring your attention to. Most of us are feeling financially worse off. If you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, 63% of us feel financially worse off than we did 6 months ago. I know I do. I really do. And secondly, it's having an impact on our mental health as a nation. Most of us are thinking about our own bills and money daily, or multiple times during the day. And 40% of those, to the right of that other statistic, whose mental health has gotten worse, blame the cost of living crisis. So I suppose I'm raising this to make you aware that a lot of people feel the same. A lot of people are in this situation and thinking, this is difficult. But again, I think what I wanted to do with this session is, rather than paint a picture of how tricky the situation is, I wanted to give you a chance to pause and take a step back. And importantly, think about the ways in the ways you might find help and value in the places that you'd least expect. I think many of us, again, I'd count myself in this, are looking for ways to cut our monthly outgoings. We're dialing back at the supermarket, shopping for energy deals, trying to find cheaper fuel. And it won't be long, I suppose, before, and if you might have already started to do this, subscriptions and the insurances that we have are up for discussion as we look through those list of direct debits. And the decision on what's essential versus non-essential takes on a new meaning when the choice is to feed the family or heat the home. And that's a big thing. And I've started to look through my own direct debits and thinking, do I really need to spend that? Can I cut back? And before I get into the specifics of what I believe is essential and where value can be sought, I want to talk about mindset for a second. I know, talking about mindset, you might think, well, what's he going on about? Why is he bringing mindset into financial resilience and protection presentation? But it's not probably the first thing you'd think of, expect from a session like this. But in times like this, your mindset and how you think about your situation is just as important as what you decide to do when you're tackling the situation head on. The first thing to say is that as our stats suggest, you're not alone. Most of us worry about money and our finances, and that's okay. It really is. It's normal to feel concerned or stressed or slightly out of control with the situation. But the important bit to stipulate is that you do have options. Again, in times like this, many of us feel powerless and there's nothing in our control, but there are things that we can't control, like energy prices. But it's important to concentrate on what you can control, not what you can't. So for example, a quick tip from me to think about is the fact that we spend 40 hours a week, most of us earning money, or probably more for most of us in terms of the 40 hours. But how much time do you actually set aside to manage that money? Putting some time aside each week to manage or be aware of our finances can help you take back some of that control, can give you that awareness, and you can start to feel better about the situation. Sounds very cliche, but making small steps can make a big difference when it comes to financial resilience. Many people look for a big change, but it's often the small changes that make the biggest difference when they're all combined together. And going back to our mindset idea and building a real strong money mindset, again, I wanted to just share a couple of more tips about building financial resilience. I think the number one thing is talking to someone about your specific situation. That might be a friend, a work colleague, or an expert. Talking about your situation or problem can make you feel less isolated and give you another perspective, but really better awareness in terms of building that mindset, as I said. To give you an example, my neighbor across the road has a small business, and he runs a small franchise, a plumbing franchise, and he got into a tricky situation recently and he needed legal advice, but he thought he couldn't afford it. What he wasn't aware that hidden within one of his insurances was a legal helpline that he could access free of charge. And often, by just discussing it with someone, they might be able to provide you with another perspective. He wasn't aware that that was within one of his insurance policies. It wasn't until he was speaking to me and I said to him that you might want to look at through some of these documentation, and then he found that he was able to access the help and support that he needed. I think the second tip, as well as putting that money management time aside, is probably try and focus on what's going well as opposed to what isn't. It takes a bit of getting used to, but by focusing what's going well as opposed to what isn't is a really powerful way of feeling more resilient when facing financial difficulty. For example, budgeting is easier to focus on what you've cut back on, but it's just as important to focus on what you should keep and why that's important to you, because that can really give you context. And if we think about our industry, the industry Alan and I are in, which is life insurance, if you've taken out life cover previously or considering it for the first time, it's easy to think it never happened to me. So what's the point? You might even look through your direct debits and think, why do I keep paying for insurance when I might never actually claim on it? What's the point? I think it can be worthwhile thinking about why something's important, why you decided to take it on, or why you're thinking about taking it on, and what the benefit to you and your wider family what that brings. The point I wanted to make is when I speak to families, and occasionally I'm still on the phone and I'm speaking to families, is thinking about what you would do if something did happen to you. What problems would it cause if you suddenly weren't here tomorrow? What would be the financial impact? What would your family have to give up? And how would that make them feel? The Florence Nightingale's Trust, as an example, is to support nurses and midwives to improve care and save lives. When we speak to anyone thinking about taking on protection, we start by asking them to think about why they feel they need it and why it's important to them. And often it's not about the individual, it's about ensuring that people around them, their network, their family is cared for and their future is secure if their loved one passes. And I think to feel financially resilient, we really do believe it's really important to have a plan B, to have a backup plan. Now, I talked about earlier how passionate I am about protection, and you might be thinking about, oh, how does protection and financial resilience and all this thing kind of link together in terms of these challenging times? It's a really good question, and I will come back to that. It should make sense at the end, but I wanted to just highlight some of the importance of protection, and it's one of those things that is often deprioritized by people, and you're more likely to insure your pet than probably yourself. But we do know that many people don't cover themselves. We know that. As the slide suggests, 16 million of us in the UK don't have life cover, and 1 in 2 of us in terms of our mortgage are not protected. And despite, I don't know about you, but New Year's resolutions, it's all about getting fit and staying healthy, and but many of us, and it is about well-being, many of us don't take on things like insurance or protection because of common misconceptions. Money Supermarket's one of our biggest partners, and they did a lot of research last year, and the 2 biggest reasons families don't take on cover is 1, because of cost. Everyone thinks it's really expensive, and 2, because they don't believe they need it or have a financial arrangement in place. So I just wanted to just address a couple of those objections, just to give you a flavour of how we can help tackle those. The first one was cost. And you may recognize some of the brands on screen. There are other brands available, but these are the ones that kind of popped out to me. And I wanted to demonstrate, I suppose, that how life insurance can be cheaper than you think, but also represents real good value when compared to what you've already spending your money on. And remember our point earlier, we talked about 40 hours a week and how much time do we spend managing our finances? Well, this might emphasize that point. The average UK household spends around £41.70 on subscription services in the UK, according to Barclaycard. I think lockdown fueled an element of that, and I think it's down by about £10 from the previous year, but it's still a staggering amount when you compare that to the cost of what we believe is the bedrock of any financial plan, which is protection. And life cover and protection cost less than you think. So bear those numbers in mind as I switch to this slide, and you compare to what you've just seen on screen to those subscription services. And you can see prices for, say, a 35-year-old can start as little as £11 a month for £200,000 worth of cover. And it's even less if you took on half that amount of cover. And obviously, all these prices are dependent on your circumstance and if you smoke and your health. But what we're very able to do at LifeCirc is work with any budget, but also take into account anyone's individual circumstances, particularly when it comes to health. And what's more, some of the insurers offer real fantastic benefits within their policies, which I'm going to touch on in a bit. But I think it's just as important to shop around for your car insurance and energy supplies. It's equally as vital to visit and shop around for your life cover policy to ensure that you're getting real good value and the best price. And when it comes to thinking about taking on cover, many people, I think, speaking to neighbours down my road, take on the first thing that's presented to them, and they never really revisit again or really look at it as a product outside of just having to be dusted off if the worst does happen. The two biggest reasons that we see people taking on cover is buying a house or having a child, and that often prompts people to take on life insurance or protection for the first time. But what does happen though is that the emotional pull of, say, having a child or buying a house, you end up taking the first thing that's presented in front of you. And what we're saying is that with health changes and your circumstances change, the policy that maybe you have or you took on previously, it's always worth reviewing. It's really good housekeeping to review your policies regularly to ensure it's keeping pace with your family, but also that you have hidden benefits within those policies that you may not know that you can access. Now, cost was the first reason many people didn't take on life cover, but the second was the fact that many people don't think they need it. They really don't think they need it, partly because they think they've got arrangements already in place. And what we often hear is that I've got cover through work, or I have savings that cover me, so I don't really need it. And if someone's financially dependent on you, it's often a good idea to have your own life cover. And also, if you're ill, it's always worth asking yourself, what can I fall back on? If I have savings, would I want to use them? And how long would they last? Did I put them aside for that specific reason? Most of us are saving to buy a holiday or go abroad or buy a car or whatever it may be. So we work really hard and probably we don't want to deplete those savings if the worst does happen. If you work for the NHS or a private employer, then it's worth really knowing your numbers. Typically, every employer, large and small, would have access to their benefits via an employee handbook or intranet site that you can access. I suppose the question I would ask you is, do you understand what benefits you get? Do you understand what would be paid out if something were to happen to you? And then take a moment, if you remember our good money mindset earlier, to think about what that means for your individual circumstance. So typically a death in service benefit which is a fancy way of saying it's a life insurance policy that pays out on a multiple of your salary. It's normally 4 times salary. So that's 4 years. Again, just thinking about your individual situation, you may or may not have dependents, but how long would that last? How long does it take to, how much does it take to run your family yearly? And what would be the impact if they lost your income? Would 4 years do it? Would 4 years be enough? It sounds like a big, almost lottery win, but 4 years, it's not a huge amount. And similarly, through the NHS and privately, you will also get access to something called income protection. And that's kind of sick pay. This pays out a portion of your income, usually 50 to 70%, if you can't work due to illness or incapacity. But what many people don't realize is it usually pays out after a waiting period, dependent on your level of service within the NHS and the example. And that could even stop after a period. I think section 14 of the NHS Terms and Conditions Service Handbook, stipulates how long you have to be in service and what sick pay you're entitled to. And with private employers, you may be entitled to some sick pay, but it's not guaranteed. And if you only get access to SSP, statutory sick pay, then guess what? That's £99 a week, which I don't know about your household, it wouldn't really go far. So again, bringing this back together and thinking about financial resilience, it's really important that you give yourself that awareness and know your numbers. Ask yourself the question to give you ask yourself the questions to give yourself the best chance of being financially resilient if you're faced with a situation where you can't work or something worse happens. There are loads of insurers that can offer specific cover for healthcare professionals and nurses as well. Alan might cover some of these in the chat, but for instance, for as little as a pound a month with one policy, we have access to specialist healthcare cover through an insurer that is tailored for those that work within a healthcare setting and maybe at particular risk for certain illnesses like HIV or MRSA or hepatitis C. There are lots and lots of things that you can access to build a plan around your family, around you, to ensure that you've got access to the support and care that you may need, again, if you're faced with a certain situation. Now, your employer may offer some benefits or a number of perks or benefits through their intranet sites or through their employee handbooks, but most of the insurers that we work with often provide extra benefits if you can't buy cover through them, which you can access free of charge. So one insurer might provide cinema tickets, another free digital GP services, yet another might provide counselling free of charge. And these services can be really valuable, especially right now when times are tight and there's so much pressure on the NHS and healthcare sector in particular, that you can have access to these services at the touch of a button. I suppose the point here is when you're thinking about financial resilience, often you might find some really useful stuff as part of policies, or you might even think about reviewing your existing policy to see if you can get better value because of these benefits exist, but a lot of people are just not aware of how they access them. What I wanted to do is just give you a couple of examples to make this come alive, I suppose. And I talk personally, if you don't mind, just about my own situation, so I can give you a flavour of what I access and how I access it. So there's two brands on screen. One of them is Vitality, the other is Aviva, and I've got also personal experience of using Shiny Mind. But if I started with Vitality, you might have heard of Vitality's plan or seen the dog on the TV and seen it advertised, but we're often asked about it a lot. And we're often asked, well, is it suitable for me? And what does it actually give me? Why would I take on a policy like that? We can help you decide that and work out if the tangible benefits and cover actually stack up a bit against any existing plan that you've got. So we can talk you through that. But in my own situation, the reason I like Vitality is their purpose is to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives, because they ask you to engage in their policies. They're very different to most classic life insurance policies, because what they do is you build up your status, which goes from bronze all the way to platinum, by becoming more active. And the more active you are with your life insurance, your income protection, your critical illness plan, the more you can stay in control of your premiums, but you can access and unlock certain benefits. So for instance, I've got two girls. My eldest is 15, my youngest is 11. They like going to the cinema. My wife is active, so I get free cinema tickets through Vitality. So if you think about that, that's about 25 quid a week. So I get weekly cinema tickets. But my wife, I'm an Android user, my wife's an Apple user. Because of my Vitality status, I've managed to get our access to a free Apple Watch, because what they do is they effectively say, as long as you're active and you build up points over time, we will provide you with an Apple Watch, and that will be free over the next couple of years, as long as you keep your Vitality status up. I'm also a bit of a coffee freak, so I get a weekly Coffee Nero, and because I'm active, I'm running the Manchester Marathon in April. I get 50% off running shoes. The reason I'm mentioning this is that there are tons of benefits within a Vitality plan, but other insurers again have accessible benefits like prescription home delivery service, bereavement fitness plans, gym discounts that can be accessed, and you may have those within your plan, but you're not aware that they exist. Another example of how plans might give you something back and help promote financial resilience is through Aviva. So Aviva is depicted by that circle on the right hand side of the screen. They're interesting because they've got an interconnected benefits system which allows you to track your own health through an annual healthcare check, but it's also got something called global treatment, which I'm a huge fan of. And for about £3 a month, what it does, it gives you access to £1 million worth of cover to access international facilities, doctors, best doctors. I don't know if you heard of best doctors, and treatments all over the world, to give you access to valuable specialist second opinion if you needed one. So as an example, we've had many claims through this particular service. If you were diagnosed with a cancer and maybe the treatment wasn't accessible in the UK, and a specialist was rare, and a specialist was abroad, what global treatment does via best doctors is pay for all that through that £1 million fund, and what that enables you to do is effectively just get a valuable second opinion at a time when, again, you may want one, and therefore and again when your family are feeling vulnerable. And going back to the start of the presentation, we talked about accessing the support and advice you need when times are tough, or you just need a helping hand. Many of the policies, just to reiterate that point, we promote or have or are able to access because we are whole of market, we can use anyone, can be really useful to you and might give you that extra little bit of support in accessing them at times when you might need that support. Now, I mentioned the Florence Nightingale's trust purpose earlier in my presentation, and most of the presentations I start with this statement on screen. So I'm kind of doing it in the reverse, which is a bit strange, but I suppose what I was trying to do today is to say to you guys as alumni, as members, as practicing nurses, as leaders, as I suppose parents for some of you, that we're proud to support the Florence Nightingale Foundation, and our commitment to you, should you wish to, and if you're interested in talking to us, then we'd love to talk to you about protection, or indeed give you a better understanding of our help and what we can signpost for you from a benefits perspective, but also your own protection should you want to. our whole purpose is to protect the UK properly. And we think protection is the bedrock of any financial plan, and certainly a real positive step in staying financially resilient in tough times. So the overwhelming message is, if you have existing protection, do dust it off, have a look at it. You may have benefits within those policies that you didn't know exist. If you don't have protection, you consider it in for the first time, then great, but you may want to review that and make sure that it is providing value for money, but also be more aware of how you access those benefits. And I think thirdly, really knowing your numbers and understanding what you have through work, what you can access through your employer, and how does that impact on your individual situation. Does that create a financial plan, a resilience, a plan B, as we termed it, to ensure that should the worst happen, or if you were sick, you have that safety net. You are able to access the support and care that you need at the time when you feel most financially vulnerable, and at the time when you obviously will want to ensure that you're getting access to the right support and care that you need. Now, finally, to end, I suppose I did mention that I was going to ask you to get your mobile phones out, which if you're able to get your camera on your phone, and you'll see a QR code on screen. That QR code, if you zap it, I think that's the right technical term, Alan, I don't really know any other word except to use zap, then that will take you through to our Florence Nightingale branded page, dual branded page, which gives you the opportunity, if you wish to talk to one of Alan and his team advisors to provide you with some signposting help, a quote if you would like to get a quote with us, or if you would like to chat through what you have in terms of your benefits through work, or indeed what you don't have. We would love to speak to you. Our commitment, I suppose, is that we want to provide something back, which you'll see on screen if you zap through, for want of a better word, or if you did take on a policy. But we also are really proud to make a donation to the Florence Nightingale Trust too, with every policy that is taken on. So I think I've overrun by a little bit of time. I hope you found that useful. I hope we've given you an overview as to why we think protection is important in these times, and also why we think it's the bedrock of any financial plan. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Ricky, thanks so much. I mean, as Ricky said, Ricky and Alan are very happy to answer questions. I just guess I wanted to say personally, to be honest, that you've definitely made me think and reminded me that it's probably been a good 10 years since I've dusted off some of my policies. So thank you so much. And I think your reminder of things like, as you said, that we spend at least 40 hours a week trying to earn money, but perhaps not paying as much attention to what goes out, I just think is really stark and really important, as you say, at these particular times. So a very great thank you for these really important points at this time in all our lives, really. So in that sense, does anybody have any further questions? I know Alan has very kindly put lots of additional info into the chat and answered Louisa's specific questions, but I just wondered, from those of you who are here, would anybody like to raise their hand or ask anything further whilst we have Ricky and Alan?
One of those topics, Rachel, that that often
no, it's tricky, isn't it? Come on, Alan, sorry.
I was asked to put the link into the chat again, but I think if you scan that, page as you see it now, you'll get that link. Failing that, we can share the link afterwards as well, because I don't immediately have
Brilliant,
it outside
thank
this
you.
QR code.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Alan, and something I didn't say at the start, but we shall share directly Ricky and Alan's details after this, because we do appreciate that some of these topics are really personal and you might just have some direct questions that you might want to ask. So by all means, please do. We obviously also want to say a very great thank you to Life Searchers for supporting the Florence Nightingale Foundation once again. And one quick question I had, if I might, Ricky and Alan, please, is one of the things, speaking from a sort of personal point of view, that I find, and I don't know if anybody else does, but often we get calls from companies in your arena in the middle of the day when life's just too busy and you can't answer that type of thing. Sort of how available are Life Search in those times outside of hours when people might want to just be in touch? And especially thinking of our nurses and midwives on the call who work all sorts of different hours, it would just be great to know that there's other times of day.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. We work until usually up until 8 o'clock at night, so we're acutely aware that everyone's got lives, and we're available over the weekend. So we're Saturdays till 2, and I think Sundays. Do you know when we're open till Alan, on Sundays?
I think it's 2 o'clock as well. But what I would add to that is many of the support services that Ricky's spoken about are provided by people who are much cleverer than what we are, and people who are available 24/7 throughout the week as well. So often it's resourced by people like Red Care or deliberate purpose-built nursing outfits as well. And just on those value-add benefits, I'll put a little note in the chat about this. But often the policy that you took out 10 years ago might not have had it. They might not have spoke about it at the time. You might not be aware of it. And the insurance companies are going through a process of developing and adding to their proposition. So it's worthwhile just touching base with your insurance company or speaking to your insurance broker and asking them to review the policy just to find out what you do have for you and your family members.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alan. And I guess really just to close, just to say once again, a very great thanks to Ricky and Alan for today. We will, as we've said, be sharing further details and a follow-up on email. But yeah, we really appreciate you giving up your time and your expertise. And certainly you've made me think I need to dust off that 10-year-old policy and get it out the cupboard this weekend and review it. So thank you so much. Just one final point to those of you who very kindly joined us today. In case you don't follow us on social media, we made a big announcement yesterday here at the Florence Nightingale Foundation, and I've just popped in the chat that yesterday we launched our new strategy, which is a really big, ambitious plan over the next 5 years, which says that in the next 5 years, by 2027, we intend to reach 1 million nurses and midwives worldwide. So there's lots developing here at the foundation too. I was thinking earlier when I was looking at Ricky's profile that, Ricky, I know that you've in the course of your career reached, I believe, at least 1.5 million people and helped them to ensure that they're protected. So we've got similarly big and bold plans here at the foundation. So hope we can get up there to those big numbers too. But please do, if you haven't already had a look to the nurses and midwives in the room, please do take a look at our new strategy. Do follow us if you can on social media and do keep in touch. We are here to support nurses and midwives like yourselves, and we're very committed to growing what we do. And once again, just a final sincere thank you to Life Search for the support you've given us as the foundation and for your time here today. So thank you so much for you all to joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.